Hey everyone, my name is Ryan H. Lewis, and we're back again for another version of serverless. This one is version 1.15, and it's got some really nice improvements to the developer experience that should change your everyday usage of serverless. I know I've already started using a lot of these features in my workflow. We'll start with a new general serverless feature, and that's the addition of autocompletion in the serverless CLI tool. Basically, once you update to 1.15, after typing in the serverless command, you can hit tab. It will autocomplete a command or give you suggestions. It works really nice, but on my setup, I've got some sort of weird bug where things are being duplicated, which is why it looks a little funny here. You shouldn't have that same problem yourself. The other big general change to serverless in this release is the new ability to use JSON for your configuration file instead of YAML. I had actually never used YAML before I started working with serverless, and even though I had some hiccups along the way figuring out how the tabbing worked and the ways that keys and properties were used, I've actually came to enjoy it. Now that you can use JSON for your serverless configuration file, I actually don't know if I'll start using it. And even though that sort of breaks my heart as a JavaScript developer, I just think that YAML is much easier to read and it's much clearer when you have those huge serverless configuration files. The rest of the features are for AWS users, but there are some pretty cool ones in here. The first is a new event for your Lambdas that works off of a Cognito user pool trigger. Basically, these triggers are sort of like lifecycle events in a Cognito user pool. Essentially, there are predefined steps where if an action happens, like a pre-sign up or a pre-authentication or post-authentication, it will fire a trigger which can execute your Lambda. With 1.15, you're able to configure this directly in your configuration file by adding the Cognito user pool event, specifying a pool name, and specifying a trigger. The nice thing about this is by just specifying the pool name here, serverless will actually create that pool for you, so you don't have to add any other CloudFormation steps to get this Cognito user pool created. If you're particular about your encryption for your AWS environment variables, you can now specify a custom KMS key to encrypt those variables. You can specify it at the service level with this AWS KMS Key ARN property, or you can specify it at the function level. Now, one thing that kind of confused me a little bit is this KMS key that you're specifying here is to encrypt your variables at rest. That means wherever AWS is actually storing them in a persistence layer. When you go to the console, you'll still be able to see your environment variables as plain text because the console is doing the decrypting for you. In addition, AWS is always encrypting these environment variables on their persistence layer. It's just if you don't specify something custom, it will use the default AWS KMS key for Lambdas. In this way, you're able to configure a custom one to use for each Lambda, and you don't have to use the default. This new feature is already really great, and it will save you a lot of time by catching errors quickly. And that's the addition of a step in the deploy process that validates your CloudFormation template. This happens after the template has been pushed up, but before the stack update kicks off. One thing that I did have to update was the permissions that my serverless user were running under. There's a specific CloudFormation validate template action, and if you don't have permissions for it already, you may need to add it. So this is essentially what it would look like. And then the last feature in this new version is the addition of an AWS Profile Flag for the CLI. You can currently specify a profile in your configuration file, but this lets you do it in the CLI as you run it. If you had a set of credentials in your AWS credentials file with a key of the plague, you can reference it in your CLI executions with the --AWS -profile command and then the key coming after that. It doesn't have to just be deploy. You can use other commands, deploy function, package, things like that. Anything that cares about the AWS profile it's running under, you can use this --AWS profile to specify it at execution time. And that's it for all the new features in 1.15. If you want to take advantage of it right now, you can update your serverless version with npm update-g serverless. And to read more specific documentation on all the new features or just general information on serverless, you can check it out at serverless.com. I'd love to hear your comments on the new features in 1.15, so feel free to speak up in the comments below. And make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more videos on serverless, AWS, Node, web technologies, really anything I'm thinking about at the time. I post videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.